So we're going to explore the sometimes murky waters of forgiveness for a whole month at Tapestry. Dave dove right into the deep end, talking about forgiveness as it applies to some truly heinous acts of violence. And it's a necessary point in the discussion of forgiveness. We'll get there in a couple of weeks. This week, instead of diving into the deep end, I want to invite us to gently step into the shallow end and maybe wade there and acclimatize ourselves to some of the issues of forgiveness. I promise in a couple of weeks, we'll talk about accountability and those situations where forgiveness is taken off the list of possibilities. Concerns about forgiveness, accountability, and measuring up come from us at a very early age. From our first days of life until we're many years old, our survival depends on acceptance and approval from our family. We have incredibly deep motivation to figure out how acceptance and fairness and forgiveness operates in our family, our tribe. So let me ask, what did you learn about forgiveness from your family? Was it offered quickly and easily? Was there always penance required or punishment? Was it held tightly? Or maybe you learned it from a faith community that you grew up in. I'm not so concerned about who taught you as I am, what did you learn about forgiveness? For me, I learned from family that time plays a very important role. At first, I can be pretty darn judgmental. It may be a minor inconvenience in traffic or a serious moral infraction, but my immediate reactions are usually harsh. I may not say them, but they're harsh. I think we all enjoy a little righteous indignation from time to time, but time passing seems to take off the edge a lot. And this is the way my family argued. Up front, there was total disagreement. How could you think that? It's just not possible. The world in those moments is very black and white. But for me and for my family, time takes the edge off and makes things different. I won't say that it heals all wounds, because it doesn't, but the passage of time allows for calmer states of mind. It allows for cooler heads to prevail. I occasionally described family as the people you can return to no matter what you've done. That's not everyone's experience, I know. But for me, forgiveness has always been available. It's just not always immediate. It takes time to make amends and to rebuild trust. But at the end of the day, there's no doubt that forgiveness is possible. What did you learn from your families? Interwoven with those lessons from our family, another piece of our sense of forgiveness comes from our religious tradition. I want to talk a little bit about the core theological mechanisms of forgiveness from our Christian past. And when I say our Christian past, I'm not assuming that you all have a Christian past. I certainly don't. I grew up Unitarian. But I do want to recognize that our Unitarian and Universalist traditions grew out of a Christian past. And like it or not, in this country, Christian theology lurks just below the surface of American culture. In very, very broad terms, a key component of mainstream Christian theology is the idea of original sin. The formula goes something like this. We humans are pretty messed up. It's just a fundamental part of who we are from the very beginning. A beloved, now deceased Tapestry member, Jay Kaiton, was fond of saying, "People are just no damn good." People are no damn good. On our own, we're incapable of finding salvation, but God, through Jesus, offers salvation to some people. Both Unitarianism and Universalism arose as a contrast to how forgiveness works in theological terms. Universalism of our history spoke of universal salvation. God saved all of us sinners with equal compassion so that no one would be punished. Or as I say today, love wins, and we're all in this together. It seems sometimes that our Unitarian forebears, though, won out in their impact and our understanding of forgiveness and redemption. Unitarians believed, and still do, that we're capable and responsible to grow as human beings, to develop our moral compass. Salvation, healing, wholeness, whatever you want to call it, aren't offered to some arbitrarily. Those are goals that we can all grow toward in this short time that we have on earth. Our inherited theology of Unitarian Universalism sits at this strange crossroads, the intersection of universal salvation and belief in moral development and growing toward wholeness. Both of those are responses to this idea of human brokenness, which is all kinds of complicated. Believe me, I know that. Both lift up forgiveness and reconciliation as a huge piece of our human journey. Of course, forgiveness isn't all about theology. Forgiveness and letting go are skills that we practice in our daily lives. There's a really charming Buddhist story that illustrates the importance of forgiveness and letting go. There are actually a few different versions of this. The story says that two monks were walking silently. The evening was approaching, and the monks were returning to the monastery where they lived. And as they walked, they came to a small river. They expected to find a boat there that would give them a lift to the other side. But instead of the boat, the two monks found a beautiful woman. She had come to this spot also to get a ride across the river. Night was approaching, and the woman was clearly concerned about how she would get to the other side of the river without being swept away. The junior monk walked right past the woman without giving the situation a second thought and waded across the river himself. The senior monk decided he could be a little more helpful. He offered to pick up the woman in need and offered to carry her across the river. He placed her down safely on the other side of the river. They parted ways with the woman, and the monks continued their long journey back to the monastery. Several hours later, having dinner, the senior monk could see some concern on the junior monk's mind. He asked, "What's wrong?" The junior monk replied, "How could you carry her like that? You know we can't touch women. It's against our way of life." The senior monk answered, "I left the woman at the river's edge a long ways back. You're still carrying her." This little story is told to make several different points of Buddhist practice. For us today, the junior monk and his inability to let go remind us so much of our need to forgive the little stuff, to set down grudges before they pile up. The junior monk held on to what he interpreted as a fault, distracting him and angering him. To move forward in life, we have to set down some things and to move on. That task of setting things down has some nuance to it. In stepping toward forgiveness and setting down, are we setting down guilt or are we setting down shame? Too often those two words get used interchangeably. They're very close cousins, but both guilt and shame invoke negative feelings about oneself. But the source of those negative feelings is very, very different. Guilt is feeling bad for something that we've done. Maybe we've hurt someone, we took the easy way out, we just didn't live up to our full potential. We all make mistakes, and sometimes for complicated reasons, we take actions that we know will hurt other people. Sometimes we feel guilty for what we've done. Shame, on the other hand, is feeling bad for who we are. It's a sense of unworthiness based simply in who we are. It comes out of a variety of sources. It can come up around our body image, our sexual orientation, gender expression. It's as simple as not living up to the impossible stereotype of the real man or the perfect woman. Shame is often anchored in those pieces of identity that have been labeled by society as less than ideal, not enough. It can also come in through religious ideas, as I understand it did for some of us. It's a sense that your very nature is not enough, fundamentally flawed and in need of fixing. No matter how hard you try, there's no fixing or changing it. And that's what's so awful about it. It's the itch that can't be scratched. So guilt is feeling bad about something that we've done. Shame is feeling bad about who we are. When we're in the midst of feeling bad, though, it's sometimes difficult to untangle those two sources of feelings. In reasonable amounts, guilt is not such a bad thing. It guides us to making better choices, mending relationships, becoming who we are. This week, as I thought about it, it reminded me of that game of warmer or colder, where you have to find a particular object or a spot in the room, and the person that is guiding you will tell you if you're getting warmer or getting colder. To take some of the edge off of that very heavy word of guilt, we might think of it as our internal guide in the life game of warmer and colder. Guilt pops up to say, nope, not that way, getting colder, try something else. In reasonable amounts, guilt is helpful. It's actually necessary. There's a word for people who don't have some guilt. They're called sociopaths. They feel no remorse for the way they impact other people. Circling back to the real topic for the day, forgiveness is all about acknowledging some wrong action, a hurt, a slight, and letting go of something that has been done in the past. In the right circumstances, we can forgive others for what they've done to us, and we can forgive ourselves for our past actions. This may sound odd as an introduction to the topic of forgiveness, but acknowledging our guilt and naming it can help us to untangle it from shame. Naming the action as a misstep anchors it in a moment in the past. It's something that happened in the past. Catholics use this fascinating practice of confession to do that. You might try writing it down in a journal, or talking to a friend, or to me, or maybe your dog. Name the action at fault so that you can move on and untangle that action from the feeling of shame. Guilt can be helpful as a point of correction. Shame, on the other hand, is debilitating. It's an itch that can't be scratched, a desire that can never be satisfied. It's unhappiness about something in you that's never going to change. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that shame is actually evil. It's rejecting the goodness and the beauty of creation that is in every person, in each one of you, in each one of us. Letting go of shame is a lifelong journey for many people. It's a huge undertaking, but one of the most worthwhile endeavors I can imagine. The more I explored forgiveness and letting go this week, the more I realized it isn't something that we do once or a skill that we perfect. It's not about a particular relationship or a particular hurt. It's a piece of life that we cycle through over and over again. So I want to leave you with the reminder of our reading from Reverend Leslie Takahashi. She wrote, "We return again and again to the season of forgiveness, and each time we come, we bring gifts, a grudge to relinquish, a hatred to extinguish, a hope that is bloated and distorted, a glancing word that has wounded. Each time we walk the road toward forgiveness, we mutter that we've been here before. When will we remember that forgiveness is not so much an act as an attitude, not so much a duty as a love we give ourselves as part of the ever unfolding new beginning?" Amen.